so fast. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here on Auto Wisdom. You can't see it right now, but I've got my short shorts on, I've got my white New Balances, my high white socks, a foldable chair in the trunk, and my original window sticker, because today I am sitting behind the wheel of a 2019 Chevrolet C7 Corvette Z06. And in traditional Corvette owner fashion, we're going to head to Cars and Coffee, we're going to post up, and we're going to make sure that everybody knows everything there is to know about this car. So before we start up this Z06, we're going to go ahead and dive into some quick technical details about the car, and also just quickly overview what differentiates this thing compared to a normal base C7 Stingray. So as you guys know, this is not a standard Corvette Stingray, it's the Z06, and one of the biggest differentiating factors about this car is the front and rear track, which are significantly wider than the base car. Up front, the bodywork is 2.2 inches wider thanks to some wider fenders and wider wheels, and at the rear it's nearly 3.1 inches wider thanks to some massive 335 rear tires, some very wide wheels, and some wider bodywork as well. Power is 650 horsepower and 650 pound-feet of torque. Independent dyno figures usually put this thing at around 550 rear wheel horsepower, which is nothing to sneeze at, and that's thanks to a supercharged 6.2 liter LT4 engine. It is a pushrod V8 with an Eaton root style supercharger that delivers about 9.5 maximum pounds of boost on the factory map setting, and that gets this thing from 0 to 60 in about 3.1 seconds flat with a good launch. So very, very fast performance figures. Now in terms of suspension, we have a short and long arm double wishbone suspension system with cast aluminum upper and lower control arms, along with transversely mounted composite leaf springs and monotube shock absorbers. At the rear of the Z06, it's got a 5-link independent suspension system with cast aluminum upper and lower control arms, as well as transversely mounted composite leaf springs and monotube shock absorbers. This car also uses GM's Trick magnetic selective ride control, which is an electronically controlled shock system that uses magneto-rheological fluid-filled dampers to basically provide improved ride comfort and handling performance. So this car can make damper adjustments on the fly within milliseconds, dependent on a number of different driver inputs and driver modes. So I think that's enough technical data. Let's go ahead and start this thing up. Oh yeah. That is the sound of bald eagles, my friends. So it's important to note that this particular Z06 is not equipped with the Z07 package, which was basically an optional performance pack that included Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires, along with carbon ceramic brakes, some revised suspension tuning adjustments, and some adjustable aero. So instead of the carbon ceramics, we've got traditional steel brakes, which feature Brembo 6-piston calipers up front, 4-piston in the rears, along with some slotted brake rotors as well. And this particular Z06 is not a manual, it's actually the 8-speed automatic, which is not the best of transmissions out there, but when you have a car that is so bonkers fast, if you're not very experienced with a manual transmission, then I think you can actually come to appreciate this automatic transmission. So it's an 8-speed torque converted unit. It definitely feels pretty dated. Doesn't feel, you know, up with the times like the ZF transmissions or even the Lexus RCF 8-speed gearbox as well that I reviewed. It's kind of got that slush box feel to it, and the paddle shifters have quite a bit of delay. However, when you are going wide open throttle in this thing, there does seem to be a lockup clutch mechanism that essentially just locks up the torque converter, and so when you're shifting at redline, you do get some pretty nasty shifts. I can appreciate that because at least when you're driving this car hard, the transmission is pretty decent and the shifts are fast, but otherwise, practically anywhere else in the RPM range, it's not a very good transmission. Definitely the manual is the way to go for a car like this. Let's see more about that power though, shall we? This thing is so fast, guys. That supercharged V8 provides some absolutely incredible power, and it's so instantaneous. There's no lag like a traditional turbocharger. This supercharger just has boost that comes on practically instantaneously, and with those 335 wide Pilot Super Sport tires, you get a great deal of grip. The traction doesn't seem to be braking on this car all that much. The Magneto rheological damper system in this car is also pretty impressive. It definitely gives you a lot of feedback in terms of the suspension system. And the car feels very flat when cornering, even given the fact that this car is bone stock. I mean, you can really carry some high speed. There is not a whole lot of body roll, and the weight transfer feels very, very smooth. I'm impressed because, you know, when you think of a car with leaf springs, ideal for a performance application, but somehow GM has managed to work their engineering magic with the suspension of this Corvette Z06, and it's really, really impressive. I'm just in absolute awe of the power of this thing. 650 horsepower in this car is just nothing to laugh at, and it doesn't feel like it's down on power. It feels every bit of that 650 horsepower. I mean, you just... C63S AMG, and that was such an underwhelming experience because there was so much sound insulation in the interior, and there was also just such a lack of sound from the exhaust system that the car just felt mundane, even though that thing had a twin turbo V8 with over 500 horsepower. But this car, on the other hand, feels like a proper sports car experience, and that obviously is because it is a Corvette. It's a sports car from the ground up, and this Z06 model just turns that up a notch. I really love the factory exhaust system on this car. It is so incredibly loud, and it just gives you so much sound, and you do get a little bit of overrun too on the downshifts. Well, and the brakes on this car feel very, very superb, even though that they aren't the carbon ceramics. They're just the steel brakes. You get a lot of initial bite, not the most progressive feeling brake pedal, but a lot of initial bite, which gives you a lot of confidence when it comes to slowing this thing down, because it does get up to very, very high speeds. And if I was tracking this car personally, I would definitely want to have the steel brakes fitted with the car, just because the carbon ceramics are so much more expensive to service. Sometimes the torque converter, as you guys might have just saw, it'll bog a little bit. If you bring this car up to redline and you don't shift immediately, it just refuses to upshift for some reason, and it's kind of frustrating because it really bogs the car down, and it just highlights some of the antiquated characteristics of this transmission, which I don't really like. But again, this absolute beast of an engine really makes up for the experience overall. I think the most impressive aspects about the Z06 come with the fact that this engine is just an absolute monster, and it's such a powerful unit that has so much instantaneous response. I'm very confident this car could easily reach a top speed of over 200 miles per hour, even in the current factory setup. And the suspension system as well, when you're driving this car in a performance-oriented manner, just really does not have a lot of body roll. I didn't really experience many understeer characteristics, and even the back end of this car with the adjustable traction control settings does not want to seem to step out. Now, I'm sure that's a different story if you're hammering the car on the track, tires are starting to get a little bit slick and overheated, and especially if you have traction control off, well, you're gonna have a lot of oversteering to deal with. And there's a lot of lightweight suspension components, front and rear aluminum subframes, a lot of the body panels, and the frame of the car as well is made of aluminum. So This car weighs roughly 3,500-ish pounds or so, and when you have 650 horsepower and 650 torque, it's plenty for this car, and the power to weight ratio is quite good. Now, in terms of the overall interior layout and driver positioning of this car, it is quite nice. You have a large digital center screen that displays your tachometer. It's also very customizable, especially with the different drive modes that this car has at its disposal. You have a speedometer on the left, a fuel gauge on the right, along with a supercharger boost pressure readout. And everything is very driver-centric, and the interior sort of wraps around the driver. You can tell that the driver is definitely prioritized in this cabin. A lot of visibility outward. The seating position as well is quite nice. I feel very comfortable and in line with the steering wheel along with the gauge cluster. I do wish I could sit a little bit lower in this car. I feel like I sit a tad high up, but given the fact that this is a Corvette, you already do sit very low. I mean, the car is very low to the ground. You do get a lot of leather as well. The dashboard is draped in leather with red contrast stitching, carbon fiber throughout the center console, and overall it does feel like a fairly high quality place to be. My only gripe really is this shifter does feel kind of old and dated, and it feels like it would be something out of like a Chevy Cruze or like a Malibu, and really kind of feels cheap. You also get this kind of corny Z06 supercharged plaque in the center console as well. That says 650 horsepower, 650 pound-feet of torque. Kind of gimmicky, I guess, because like it's a Z06. We all know how much power this car has, and whoever's going to be driving it is definitely going to know that as well. Overall, I think for the money, this is a fantastic performance car, and I think it's been somewhat overshadowed lately by some of the newer Corvette models, as stated previously. But I mean, I think if you can pick one of these things up for, you know, around 70,000, 65, 70K in the used market, it's so much car for the money, and it's definitely something that is going to be continuously leaving a smile on your face. So with all that being said, I'm going to wrap this review up here, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. As always, if you can go ahead and support the channel by leaving a like on this video as well as subscribing down below, I would appreciate it very much. And with all that being said, I'm looking forward to catching you all in the next video. Take it easy. Bye-bye.